Good evening, everyone, and welcome to North Central Technical College for this evening's debate between Congressman Sean Duffy and his challenger, Professor Mary Heft. I'm Seth Mila with WSAU News Talk Radio. I'll be your moderator for this evening. Let me take a moment to very quickly introduce our panelists. First, we have Mark McPherson from WAOW Newsline 9. We also have Jeff Thalen, WSAW News Channel 7, and Richard Moore from the Lakeland Times. We have a few rules that we will be following this evening. I thought I would go over them very quickly. The panelists will address each of their questions to an individual candidate. That candidate will have 90 seconds to respond, followed by a 90-second rebuttal from the second candidate. Each panelist is permitted one follow-up question for the entire debate on the same or related topic to both candidates. Each candidate will be given 60 seconds to respond in reverse order from the first response, of course. The candidates will not be allowed to interrupt each other's statements or the rebuttals, and the order has been determined by a coin toss prior to the debate. Opening statement will be 1 minute, and Professor Heft has won the coin toss for that. We will also have a 1-minute closing statement, and the coin toss was also won by Professor Heft, so she will go first for each of those. Each candidate has 2 challenge flags, each of which can be thrown following a rebuttal statement from the other candidate. The candidate who threw the flag will then be allowed to make an additional 30-second rebuttal to the other candidate's rebuttal. Got it?
Got it.
Okay. All of the challenge flags must be thrown during the first 50 minutes of this debate. Like I said, there will be a 1-minute closing statement. Now, this is a little bit of a rule for our audience in the facility this evening. There will be no audience participation in this debate. Disruptions are not allowed. Offenders will be warned, and then you may be ejected from the theater. We all set and ready to go? All right, then let us begin. The first question comes to us from Mark McPherson of WAOW Newsline 9.
We're going to do
opening statement. Thank you very much. Mary?
All right. Well, good evening, Seth and panelists. Good evening, everyone. North Central Technical College, amazing facility. Thank you so much for letting us be here and taking such good care of us. Thank you to my family, and thank you to an amazing campaign group. I really want to thank everyone, too. There's another group out there that couldn't be here. They are the sophomore class from Medford High School, and their teacher, Corey Nazer. They're listening. It's being live streamed. I want to thank them. They have gotten so involved in politics, and Corey Nazer is what great teaching is all about. If I were a panelist tonight, I'd be asking my opponent a few questions. I'd be asking him why he hasn't done more to get federal funding for our schools that are so hurting. Why he calls our universities in this area Club Meds, as though we're flush with money when we're having difficulty opening our doors.
Okay, that's 1 minute. Congressman Duffy?
That must be the warning sound. Mary, it's great to be here with you. Panelists, thank you for your involvement. Everyone in the auditorium and everyone who's watching at home, NTC, Lori Wires, thank you for your participation and involvement in tonight's debate. I want to give a special thank you to my wife Rachel, who's here with 3 of my 8 children. I didn't give you any young ones tonight, so you're welcome for that. Listen, it's been an honor to fight for your American dream. Whatever that may be, it's different for everybody, whether you want to be a logger or a farmer or a mechanic, a machinist, a school teacher, a small business owner, or a stay-at-home mom. And right now, our American dreams are being crushed by an overwhelming and intrusive government. Washington bureaucrats who think they know better how to run our lives, our communities, and our families. Pushing back to make sure you have the freedom to live your life the way you see fit is what I've been fighting for on a daily basis as I've had the opportunity to serve you. It's a funky song.
All right, now we will begin our questions from our panelists. The first question comes from Mark McPherson, WAOW Newsline 9. And that will go to Congressman Sean Duffy.
Wonderful.
Thank you both for being here. There was a point where we weren't sure if these debates were going to happen. There was extensive disagreement about locations, schedules for these debates. And it played into a narrative that a lot of voters have that parties can't agree on absolutely anything. that there's hopeless gridlock and we can't get anything done. And many politicians, especially when they're running for office, say they're willing to reach across the aisle and work with the other party. Can you please give us one example of a bill that has been proposed by the other side that you are willing to support and vote for, Congressman?
Well, a couple things on the bipartisan note. I had Secretary Castro, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, a devout Democrat who's out campaigning for the Democrat Party and Hillary Clinton right now. He came to Wausau as part of our Homelessness and Hunger Summit, making sure we can talk about how do we do a better job of helping people who don't have the resources to get themselves into an affordable house. On my committee, I work with Democrats across the aisle because in this environment, if you want to get anything done, you have to actually find a partner on the other side because you might be able to pass a Republican bill in a Republican House. But to get it passed, you need to get it through the Senate where you have 6 Democrat senators who need to join you. And then you need a Democrat president to sign it. So if you want to get something done, you start early, reach across the aisle, and work together. I had a small a bill that dealt with emerging growth companies that would widen their tick size. It gets to be a little bit complicated, but it would bring more liquidity to these, or more money to these emerging growth companies that would allow them to expand and grow. And those small companies are the companies that grow so many jobs in our communities. So it's that kind of engagement that I've had across the aisle that I think has been bringing success not just to our district, but also as a fair member of Congress.
The next question comes from Jeff Talon, WSAW, and will be for Professor Mary Heft.
But doesn't
I'm sorry,
Professor Heft have a
rebuttal.
Thank you. First of all, I guess I'd like to talk about the debates, and that is, I wanted to make it clear that I accepted every offer for a nonpartisan debate that was offered to both of us. And unfortunately, Sean, for some reason, decided to say no to every one of those nonpartisan offers. And I think it is so important. I think it is important that we reach across the aisle, that we say, we can do this. We can be doing this together. And I would have loved to have been doing this at least 6 times, and early on enough so that each of you could listen to us side by side, agreeing on certain issues, differing on certain issues. That's important. When Dave Obey endorsed me for this position, Dave Obey said, you know what, Mary? What you've got is that basket of tools that are going to unlock the gridlock. I'm a communications professor, but I teach finding your political voice, finding your international political voice, creativity and problem solving. So I do have those tools that are going to break that gridlock, and I would love to reach across the aisle. And I've been looking into this question, and I know that Sean and I agree on something. Neither of us think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership should go forward. And that's one area that, I think I've read that.
All right. Now we will have our second question from Mark Talon, WSAW, and it will go to Professor Mary Heft.
Congressman, Professor, good to see you both again.
Thank you.
The price of insurance premiums for people buying them through Obamacare expected to rise 22% nationally this year, 16% in Wisconsin. 85% of people using it will get some tax credits to help pay, but deductibles will also be rising. On the other hand, some 20 million people are insured through Obamacare. What is your stance on Obamacare?
Well, my stance is, number one, I am so grateful that we took that huge step forward to do something to get people who couldn't be on health care finally on health care. I've spoken to so many people in the 7th Congressional District who had pre-existing conditions, weren't getting any health care, and now they have it. So that's crucial. But I've been listening. I've been listening to the people in the district, and they're telling me over and over again that health care for them, for many, is too costly, and something must be done about it. I was talking to an owner of a company, a Republican owner of a company, and he said to me, Mary, we need to get health care out of the company. He said, we offer a great plan, but we need to get it out of this company. And he looked at his co-owner and he said, I don't know if you agree with me, But the answer is we need to go with a single-payer plan. And I agree with that. I support a single-payer plan. The research is showing that with a single-payer plan, that's the best, the most affordable approach. It's something that's going to save families. It's going to save the employer thousands of dollars and save the individual thousands of dollars as well.
This was one point of disagreement. This was foreseeable, what was going to happen with Obamacare. We knew that there was going to be a spike in premiums and an increase in deductibles. You've seen, you said 16%, Jeff. I've heard numbers in some counties up to 30% increases. And remember when Barack Obama and Russ Feingold told us that if we pass this bill, you can keep your doctor. If you pass this bill, you can keep your insurance company. And by the way, an average family of four will have their insurance costs drop by $2,500 a year. All those promises were false. And so, Jeff, I agree. There's some people who do have health insurance now under this program. But I talked to countless families who have been priced out of health care. They used to be able to buy health care coverage in this state, but today they said, listen, my health care coverage for my family went from $800 to $2,500, and the deductible went from $2,500 to $10,000. I might be able to buy this today, but I can't afford this for the coming future. So if you're going to lie about what Obamacare is going to do, how do we know that the promise that's being made today, that a single-payer system is going to care for our people? I want to have a patient-centered system that allows you to make the best decisions for you and your family. I have 8 kids. I might want to buy maternity coverage. But we have some people are out of their childbearing years. Why are you buying maternity coverage? Let's not force that on you. Buy insurance that fits the risks in your life that work for your family.
The next question will be for Congressman Sean Duffy from Richard Moore of Lakeland Times.
Thank you.
Richard.
Congressman, as you know, as both of you know, trade has been a central issue in the federal campaigns. Professor Heft has already brought up the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'd like each of you to explore that, and you first, Congressman, in greater detail. The Economic Policy Institute has a recent study out that blames trade deals like NAFTA and our trade policies for the loss of as many as 5 million manufacturing jobs. But on the other side of the coin, there are industry groups out there that say the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a horse of a different color, that it can actually reduce income inequality because it will remove tariffs on cheap goods. The American Footwear Association says the American consumer could save $1.5 billion in a decade on children's shoes alone. So what do you say to the industry groups? How do you answer that argument? Do you think it holds water? And what do each of you think are the positives and the weaknesses of the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
So I think it's important to note that Americans make up roughly 5% of the global population. So 95% of consumers live outside of America. And it's great to be able to access those markets with our American products. But if you negotiate bad deals, that doesn't help American manufacturing and American businesses. It hurts those businesses. There's a stat that I heard recently that we've lost 70,000 manufacturing facilities since NAFTA was passed. And again, I think we have those who negotiate these trade pacts that look more to the country in which we negotiate with instead of our families and communities that could be hurt by this trade. And so if we can structure a trade deal, whether it's with Asia or Europe, I'm all in favor of it as long as we look out for our own people. But when we structure this deal, again, that you have this great sucking sound, I think that was Ross Perot, so you're going to lose all these jobs when you engage in this agreement. And that's what's happened. And so if we get TPP, I'm opposed to it because I don't think it's the right kind of deal for us. If we can renegotiate it, reanalyze it, and get a deal that's going to work for our farmers and our manufacturers and our loggers, I'll be all in. But when it doesn't do that, I am all out.
Well, we agree on this issue. When I first studied with my university students, when I studied NAFTA, we studied NAFTA, it sounded pretty good. This was before it was implemented. It sounded like it was going to bring jobs to the United States, jobs to Mexico. It sounded like a great deal to us. But looking at it after the fact, and yes, I think I've used that 70,000 jobs lost to NAFTA. Jobs in Wisconsin, 70,000 jobs in Wisconsin lost to NAFTA. Canada is coming out of NAFTA looking pretty darn good. But both Mexico and the United States aren't doing well with it. And so I don't support NAFTA. So now when we look at the Trans-Pacific Partnership, when we look at that, I have no reason to believe that it's going to be any different than NAFTA. Someone has to convince me of that. Someone has to say, we've lost 5 million jobs, 5 million marketing jobs, because outside of our borders, and who's suffering because of that? The people in the 7th Congressional District are suffering. We need to find a way to bring those jobs back. But this goes back to the very first question that was asked. We have to find a bipartisan way to work together to figure out how can we make TPP work so that it's not that one country suffers and the other gains.
The next question comes from Mark McPherson and will be for Professor Mary Heft.
One of the unique things about this election, the presidential election, is the unpopularity of the two presidential nominees. This is actually a question for both of you in two parts. Congressman Duffy, your party's candidate is not shy about going on Twitter rants, not shy about attacking people, has been caught on tape making inappropriate comments about women. I'm wondering if you support his behavior. And Ms. Heft, your candidate's integrity has been called into question, especially with the email scandal that's dogged her campaign. She has said she didn't email classified emails, and she did. Do you trust her?
Okay, and I'm beginning. So let me begin with, I don't think it's a question of do I trust Hillary Clinton. It's a question of what is the FBI, what did they do, what did they find? And they studied her emails with a fine-tooth comb. And what did the FBI say? What did Comey say on July 6th? He said no reasonable prosecutor would take this case forward. And so that sounded like innocent to me. Actually, on July 6th, he said there were three emails that appeared to be classified, but then the next day he said, nope, they weren't. Those were not marked as classified. But let's take a look at Donald Trump. His issues are different. This is a man who has made it clear in his boasts, in his rants, that he has sexually abused women. And now 12 women, I don't know how many women have to come forward to say, no, that wasn't just locker room talk. He really did those things that he boasted about. And they're terrible things. So I question my opponent saying we need to be able to separate his private life from his policies, because the sexual abuse of women is not private life. That's criminal activity. And it's going to spill over into policies dealing with reproductive rights of women, violence against women.
Congressman Duffy.
There is only one candidate that is being investigated by the FBI right now, and that's Hillary Clinton. I think it's important that all Americans look at the deficiencies of both these candidates. And when we talk about Donald Trump, I took it to him for those outrageous comments. That's not the way I treat my wife or my daughters. I'm offended by it. But I'm also offended by the fact that we have a Secretary of State that was given special access as a Secretary of State to our government if you gave money to her Clinton Foundation. And the fact that she had 33,000 emails on her device, on her iPhone, that she deleted with the bleach bit, number one, on the server, 33,000 emails that she deleted with the bleach bit, and she took a sledgehammer to her iPhones to get rid of all of these emails. Not only that, what do you say to the families of Benghazi, where these were her employees? For 13 hours, she didn't do anything to save those 13 men. Not one plane left the tarmac. Not one wheel turned to save those men. And I think you should be able to call out Hillary Clinton for being dishonest and, frankly, being under investigation for the FBI, just like I'll call out Donald Trump. When Donald Trump says things that are positive about Russia, guess what I say? Putin's a thug. You got to be honest about these people. But that Mary, you won't be honest about Hillary Clinton and her deceit and dishonesty and criminal behavior, I think that says more about you than it does about Hillary or Donald.
All right, we have our first challenge. Mary Heft, Professor Heft will have 30 seconds.
I think the important thing is we need to be a society that listens to what is said. We listen to the FBI, and Comey said no reasonable prosecutor would take this case forward. So we cannot condemn Hillary Clinton right now because suddenly there are more emails. Whose emails? Are they Huma Abedin's emails? What is said in them? We cannot judge this woman based on emails.
The next question will be
Can
from
I throw
Jeff.
my flag? I don't know how we're supposed to do that. I have 30 seconds? She destroyed,
yes,
she
go
destroyed
ahead.
33,000 emails. She destroyed her cell phones. The FBI, James Comey, just sent a letter to Congress saying he was reopening an investigation on Hillary Clinton, on emails, on secret classified information that was on a non-secure server, endangering American secrets. And not only that, the pay-for-play between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department, active investigation with Hillary Clinton, the State Department, and that is very clear. Investigation open and well-functioning within the FBI.
Okay. The next question is from Jeff Talon from WSAW and will be for Congressman Sean Duffy.
The federal minimum wage right now $7.25 an hour, which comes to $15,100 annually. Same in Wisconsin. A recent proposal to boost it to $10.10 per hour failed. Now, a 2009 Meta study showed boosting the minimum wage had virtually no impact on hiring. It also had virtually no impact on people getting out of poverty and into the middle class. Favorite arguments of both sides. What is your stance on the federal minimum wage? Should it be raised?
So I think economies and communities are different. I think we should look to our states to deal with this issue. But let me be clear. I started off working at the IGA in Hayward, bagging groceries for minimum wage. My daughter is making $7.25 working this summer at Dairy Queen. I'll embarrass her. She probably wasn't worth $7.25. These are starting wages. And I want to see people not get stuck in these starting jobs. I see all of you who had a minimum wage job is moving up in the economic ladder, getting a good skill set, learning how to work hard, and taking advantage of the American dream. But one of the problems that our businesses have is those who say, I want to raise the minimum wage. That's great. But then they also say, I want to tax you more. I want more rules and more regulations that come from Washington that are going to cost you more to comply with. Not only that, I'm going to jack up the cost of your health care that you buy for your employees. And I want to increase the cost of your energy because I'm going to have a whole bunch of new rules. So if you buy gas or oil or electricity, the prices are going up. And so you hit these small businesses at every single turn, and then you come and say, I want you to pay a higher wage. Let's take this burden off our small businesses. Let's cut them a break so they can raise their wages and pay people more. But you can't hit them at every level and think that you're not going to lose jobs, Jeff. Let's give them a break and let the wages rise to help our families and our community, but you can't hit them at every turn.
Poverty in Wisconsin is at a 30-year all-time high. Wisconsin ranks #1 among all 50 states in the most rapidly disappearing middle class. We have a minimum wage that is a guaranteed poverty wage. $7.25 an hour is a guarantee that our hard-working men and women of this 7th Congressional District, working 40 to 60 hours a week and more, are going to continue to live in poverty. It's unconscionable that we don't address that. So I was talking to a business owner in Wausau, and he said, Mary, I'm worried. I'm worried what raising that minimum wage is going to do to my business. And I said, and I'm worried for your small business. So this would be my promise to you. I would try to introduce legislation that went this way. As that minimum wage goes up to a living wage, you get a federal subsidy so that you are not impacted by that increase in wage. At the end of the 3 years, when that living wage is finally there, if your business is doing fine, the subsidies are gone. But if you continue to suffer, the subsidies stay. You are not going to be impacted by that raise in minimum wage. But here's the problem. It's mainly women that are getting that $7.25.
I'm gonna throw a flag.
All right, Congressman Duffy, 30 seconds.
This is what we have. Raise minimum wage, another government program, another thing to comply with, more rules, more regulations to get more subsidies. It's more government upon more government. This plan doesn't work. In our community, look around. There's really good paying jobs or decent paying jobs that aren't $7.25. They're $10, $20, $15 an hour, and we can't fill them. There's help wanted signs everywhere in our community. Let's get people the skill set at places like NTC so they can take advantage of the jobs that we have right here. I'm getting excited. Put my flag away.
All right, the following question is from Richard Moore of Lakeland Times for Professor Mary Heft.
In his campaign in the last few weeks, Donald Trump has pledged to drain the swamp. And one of the swamps he wants to drain is Congress through term limits. Hillary Clinton has not yet taken a position or hasn't said which way she believes on term limits for Congress. For what it's worth, Bernie Sanders said it would make a bad situation worse. Do you support term limits for Congress, and why or why not?
I haven't made up my mind on that one. I think that the problem, here's the problem that I have. I don't want to keep great leaders like Dave Obey from continuing on. And he was at this job for 42 years, and he served the people of the 7th Congressional District well. So I don't want to enforce a policy for that reason. So I don't think so. I think we need to come up with a way. Here's the problem. When people stay in office, and I'll talk about my opponent right now, he's taken $6 million in big donations from the top 1%, from Wall Street. And we need to find a way to get big money. We've got to find a way to get big money out of politics. So the best way it's probably not going to be term limits. Maybe term limits would work so that I could say, wait, this is my last term. I can finally serve the people. I don't have to worry about dialing for dollars, getting more money. I can serve the people, or I don't have to worry about serving the upper 1%. I can serve the people of the 7th Congressional District. But I don't think the answer is term limits. Instead, it's getting money out of politics. It's getting rid of Citizens United. It's putting a limit so that Sean and I, either one of us can't spend more than $100,000 on this campaign, and then we work for you.
42 years is way too long. I support legislation on term limits or a constitutional amendment on term limits. Whether, again, it's 10 or 12 or 15, 16 years. I think it's important to move people through the system. But you can't just do it for one member or one state. Otherwise, if Wisconsin does it and you lose all your members, you don't have seniority, and South Carolina all of a sudden has all the seniority and you don't have a position in Congress to have your voice heard. So if you do it, it has to be across the board for everybody. But Mrs. Heft was just talking about big money in politics. There's only one dark money group that's running ads in this district today, and it's an ad against me. And many of you who live in the Wausau media market, you have seen millions of dollars spent against me and another one lying about me right now. And if you want dark money out of politics, you wouldn't put that ad on your Facebook page and applaud it and say, isn't this dark money ad hitting Sean Duffy? Isn't it great? All my supporters, look at it. It's hitting him. You might say, you know what, I'm a person of principle. I don't agree with these ads. We shouldn't put it on our Facebook page. I'm actually going to call for you to take down that ad. But you can't come in here today and say, hey, everyone, I don't like dark money ads unless they're being run against Sean Duffy. That doesn't work. If you're opposed to it, be opposed to it at every moment of the day.
Professor Heft, throwing her flag. That is the second flag for each of you.
No more flags, right?
No more flags. Okay.
Sean Duffy chairs a bank oversight committee and recently accepted more than $400,000 in political contributions from bankers, the very same people that he oversees. We know what happened with Wells Fargo. Who was one of the recipients of a donation from Wells Fargo? Sean Duffy. And he's overseeing He's overseeing this bank that defrauded more than 2 million people in our country.
Next question is from Mark McPherson to Congressman Sean Duffy.
Immigration's been a hot topic on the campaign this season. It's the cornerstone of Mr. Trump's campaign. Can you please detail for voters your stance on immigration, specifically whether you support beefing up border security with a wall and what you would do with illegal immigrants who are already here?
Yeah, I would just go back to that last point first. 75% of my contributions come from Wisconsin and low-dollar contributors because I've inspired people around this district by my hard work and my effort and my ideas to get them to contribute to my campaign. Pull it up on YouTube and see what I did to the CEO of Wells Fargo. Check it out. Go after him hard. But in regard to immigration, it's an important issue. We have to secure the border. Not only is it people, guns, but drugs that are devastating our community that are coming across this southern border. We have to secure it. Mr. Trump wants to build a wall. Whether it's a wall, whether it's boots on the ground, whether it's technology, we have to know who comes in and out of our country, because if you don't have a border, you do not have a country. I agree with that. But once you secure the border, and you got to verify it first, then you have to look at the people that we have in our country who are here without documentation. And I think if they pay their taxes, they haven't broken any other laws, and they're not getting subsidies from the government or entitlements from the government, we can offer them a pathway to legal status, which is not citizenship. Meaning they can come out of the shadows. They could travel. They might be able to go back to their country of origin. But this is a plan that we had a bipartisan group in the House and the Senate, people you would be surprised that are working together to get this done. It got tanked a couple years ago for a number of reasons, but also we got to work on work visas to meet the demands of our economy that aren't being met by our local workers.
My father's parents came here from Ireland. My mother's mother came here from Germany. This was the land of their hope. This was the land of their dreams. Yes, we have 11 million illegal immigrants in our country, undocumented immigrants. But they're men and women and children that you and I both know. You and I know they're hard workers. Many of them, most of them, are the men and women that we want to be citizens. So I support the plan that was passed by Senate, but never saw the floor of Congress for reasons of Boehner saying it's not going to be considered here. We need to consider it. These are the men and women that we want to be our citizens. And what are we going to do? Have them leave their 5 million children here while we send them back home? And what kind of a country is it that Donald Trump wants, that he would do that? Right now, under Obama, we have fewer undocumenteds coming in from Mexico into the United States than we have leaving. His plan is working. Security is strong on the border. I'm fine with having even stronger security on the border, but right now the number coming in is significantly lower, yes. But why the difference in language? Why call it, we'll give them legal status? Why not call it citizenship?
The next question is from Jeff Talon, WSAW, for Professor Mary Heft.
More than 100 measures aimed at gun control have been proposed and failed at the federal level since 2011. In spite of polls showing 64% of Americans feel there could be extensive gun laws, such as tougher background checks and preventing people from the no-fly list getting guns without interfering with the Second Amendment. What is your stand on any sort of gun control law, including background checks, more extensive checks, and people on the no-fly list getting no guns?
My stance is that I support the Second Amendment to the Constitution, and I respect the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution that we have a right to have our arms, and that's important. Respecting the Constitution and respecting the Supreme Court. Those are very important to me. But I also think it's important that we know how to use those guns. That's very important. My son was an officer in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Ryan died when his service weapon accidentally discharged. That's an officer trained only 8 hours in the use of his service weapon, but he accidentally died. We do not want our men, our women, who are using guns, who have guns for their own safety, for the purpose of protecting their families. We do not want them to die because their guns accidentally discharged or they didn't know how to use them. Do I want people whose names are on a no-fly zone, no-fly list because they're on a terrorist watch? Do I want them banned from buying guns? That seems like common sense, doesn't it? It absolutely does. But do I think their name could have accidentally made it to that list and that they need the opportunity to appeal? Absolutely. But we need to protect Americans. We need to make sure that guns are not in the hands of terrorists. We need to make sure that background checks are required.
Well, I'm a longtime supporter of the Second Amendment and a gun owner myself. And I guarantee you that I am going to continue my fight to make sure we preserve and protect your Second Amendment because we have people in Washington who don't share our views of firearms. And they probably have different experiences than we have growing up in the community in which we've grown up. We're used to them. Our parents, our grandparents taught us how to use firearms. But I'm going to make sure to fight and protect that. With regard to the no-fly list, okay, if you get on the no-fly list, how do you get off? The legislation never said there's any due process to get off a terrorist no-fly list. And so if you're going to take away someone's Second Amendment right, don't you deserve due process? Before you're thrown in jail or convicted of a crime, you get a trial. You get due process. We should give you due process before we take away your constitutional rights. That doesn't exist for the terror no-fly list. But not only that, think about what the FBI has said about this, okay? If you're a terrorist, right, I'm gonna come and do really bad things in America, and you want to know, is the FBI on to me? Is the government on to me in my nefarious activities? What are you going to do? You're going to try to buy a gun. And if you can buy a gun, they're not watching you. But if you can't buy a gun, you know that they're watching what you're doing. So this is a tip-off to would-be terrorists, and that's why the FBI doesn't support the terror no-fly list.
The next question comes from Richard Moore of Lakeland Times for Congressman Sean Duffy.
Congressman, President Obama has made the use of executive orders a trademark of his presidency. Most notably, his actions on immigration to grant quasi-legal status and work permits to 4 million undocumented immigrants. Professor Heft alluded to the need for Congress to act on immigration. The President on immigration and other executive order issues says we can't wait when Congress doesn't act. Many of his critics on those say that no matter how good the policy is, the executive orders are unconstitutional. What is your view of the President's use of executive orders, especially his immigration actions, and what can Congress do to assure its role as a co-equal branch of government?
That's a great question. So first, the President, as a constitutional law professor, says, well, if the Congress doesn't act, well, I need to act on my own. That's not the way it works. Our founders said, no. This legislation starts in the House, and they can pass these bills and send them to you, Mr. President, for your signature, but the Constitution doesn't allow you to go around the Congress. Really big problem. And it was that action, that executive order on immigration, that tanked this bipartisan House and Senate effort that could have addressed this problem for the long term, not for the short term by way of executive order. But here's one of the problems. In the federal government, you have all of these rules and regulations that come from regulators. And so if there's a EPA or a Department of Labor, name the agency that comes out with a rule that you do not like. What do? You come to your Congress, go to Tammy Baldwin, maybe on the left, and Ron Johnson on the right, and you might even come and see me. And what do? I write a letter to these agencies because the Congress doesn't have any power and control anymore. What we need to do is take that power and control back in the House. It's one of Paul Ryan's top initiatives. And the way you do that is say, okay, any rule or regulation that is coming out of an agency, that regulation has to come back to the House and the Senate for our approval. We give it an up or down vote. And when that happens, all of you have a voice now in your government. You can say, Duffy, great bill, vote for it. Or this is horrible, vote against it. But you're now again empowered in the form of government that has a huge impact in your life.
There comes a time when we need to act, and we need to act fast. and we might not have time to go through the process of letting Congress talk about it, letting Senate talk about it. These times are few and far between, but we need to accept that there's a time when it might be necessary. And I think that the immigration executive order is one of those. People in the 7th Congressional District have made it so clear to me, people at 2 companies have said to me, Mary, we don't know what we would do without the workers that we have. We believe that many, if not most of them, are undocumented, and we couldn't function as a business without them. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that there's a time and that it be rare that executive order is used. I'm wishing that it had been used at the Dakota Access Pipeline. I am wishing before the sacred remains of Native people had been plowed up so that we could have a pipeline. I'm wishing that there had been an executive order that said, stop, stop. And that's so limited, because it's crucial that we have Congress and Senate making those decisions, but yes, it's important.
The next question will be from Mark McPherson of Newsline 9 to Professor Mary Heft.
I want to talk about voter ID. It's passed in Wisconsin. It's been challenged in court. There's a growing belief this election cycle that elections are rigged and that voter ID would cut down on fraud. Others point to studies that show almost no voter fraud, and voter ID is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Do you support voter ID laws?
Oh, boy. No. I am so afraid of what's going on right now in Wisconsin. I mean, you've seen the studies. If you read, you know that there are over 1 billion votes cast. 1 billion votes. And among those 1 billion votes, there were 33 verifiable cases of voter fraud. 33 out of 1 billion. But when we're looking at Wisconsin alone with our voter ID laws, it's believed that over 5,000 voters are going to be disenfranchised. How wrong is that? How wrong is that for something that is being made up as a big problem in our country? Because you are looking at someone who believes in the solemnity of a vote, how important a vote is. A vote for everyone is crucial. But when all of a sudden, just in Wisconsin alone, we might be stopping 5,000 people who should be voting, we might be making that impossible in one state alone. Something needs to be done about that. And Wisconsin especially, what's going on in Wisconsin is egregious. And it is an effort, an all-out effort, to keep certain people from voting, and it's the poor.
I don't know that Mary is saying that to board a plane, you're disenfranchised because you don't have an ID and you should be able to board a plane without legal documentation. Or the fact that the video store down the street won't give me my video unless I show them an ID. Virtually everything we do in our lives requires an ID. And I think the integrity of our voter system, and by the way, if someone can't afford an ID or they're not driving, we'll pay for it. You come in, we'll get you an ID. We want to make sure that everyone can vote. But I also want to make sure that every person gets only one vote. You don't get more than one. And we hear stories now about how we have dead people on the rolls who are voting. That's a well-known fact in Illinois. We had heard those stories previously in Wisconsin. And so the way you get rid of that is come on in, pull out your ID so we know who you are. And I think that just goes to the integrity of our electoral system to make sure we reduce the amount of shenanigans that can or could be played. And you bring up the point that there's allegations that that the election's rigged. A great way to make sure there's not even a discussion about rigged elections is that we have machines that work and people come in and show an ID so we know who they say they are. That, back to you.
The next question will be from Jeff Talon of News Channel 7 for Congressman Sean Duffy.
The federal government now says student loan debt is $1 trillion in the United States, the average borrower owing $26,000 upon graduation. Money Magazine says it's getting worse because federal grants and other support have failed to keep pace with the increase in college costs. Obviously, I don't have to explain to either one of you of what those people could be spending that money on if they weren't paying back student loans. My question is, do you have a way to reduce student loan debt, or at least to make it easier to pay?
Yeah, a couple points. In the last 10 years, we've had inflation at a rate of probably 10%. But the cost of college has gone up by 35%. The cost year over year in our college education system is skyrocketing. And so I think, Jeff, we have to look and say, what is driving this cost? Are professors getting higher wages? I don't think Mary's going to say that, no. Do we have more administrators? Is that happening? Are we building new buildings with swimming pools or racquetball courts? What is driving the cost of education? If we don't analyze that, we can't get to the root cause of these drivers. But nothing has been going up. I'm sure the expenses at Channel 7 or Channel 9 haven't gone up like that, or the paper, or 550. What's happening in the school system? Let's look at that. One other thing, I do think kids should be able to refinance their student loans. It's a big deal. You have historic low interest rates. Do you want to know why you can't do that right now? In the Affordable Care Act, which isn't affordable, also known as Obamacare, it wasn't just about health care. They actually dealt with student loans. And so the federal government now administers and makes the loans to our schools and to our kids. And what they did is they're taking billions of dollars out of the profits that come from these kids as they pay their loans, and they're using it to pay for Obamacare. If you support Obamacare, you should say, you know what, I'm also taking money away from these kids that are getting driven out of a new house or new car, which Jeff just mentioned. So there's a lot of things we can do, but the drivers of that cost, I think, is where we start.
I'm not sure where Sean Duffy has been, but he has not been in the universities in the 7th Congressional District. He calls universities, I read this in an interview that he had with you, Richard, he called our universities Club Meds and talked about swimming pools. Our UW college system right now is desperately hurting. Talk about the finances that we offer our university professors. Someone comes in, they maybe had tenure at another university, they maybe have 20 years of teaching experience. To get a job at our university, the starting salary with their PhD required $43,500. Some of our faculty, if they have enough children, and several have when we hire them, qualify for food stamps. So I'm not quite sure where you've been, Sean Duffy. You need to check out the UW colleges. You need to check out the universities in the 7th Congressional District. But yes, I absolutely agree that student loans need to be able to be refinanced. And I have also a plan. And that plan is right now when I talk to Bill, I don't have time for that plan. I have a plan, and if there's another question, I can tell you about that plan of 2 years of technical school or university that's public school education.
The next question is from Richard Moore of the Lakeland Times for Professor Mary Heft.
That's not the question. According to the Carbon Tax Center, the United States must reduce its energy use by 59% to meet the Paris Accords climate change temperature goals, which it says can only feasibly be done by taxing carbon and switching rapidly to alternative energy sources. The question is, do you believe the Paris Climate Change Accords are a desirable and realistic foundation for our energy policy, or is it more important to focus on energy independence and fully embracing all available resources, alternative as well as fossil fuels, and using hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling?
Richard, it's not what I believe. It's what scientists believe globally. My opponent sides with the 3% of scientists who say that we're not responsible for the climate change that's occurring right now. I side with the 97% of scientists globally who say climate change is real, we must act now, we must act fast. So Sean knows the research. I know he knows the research. Why would he side with 3% of scientists when he knows that if he's wrong, it's so dangerous? It's because his backers, like the Koch brothers, own companies that spew, Koch brothers alone, Their companies spew 24 million tons of carbon into the air that you and I breathe every year. So I think that's why he's siding with those 3% that say, we don't have to do anything about the carbon emissions because it's not man-made. It is man-made. I've been talking to the Citizens Climate Lobby, and what they're saying to me is, Mary, there's a wonderful plan that's going to reduce the number of carbon dioxide emissions in our air, and that's called the carbon fee and dividend program. And I know I won't have time to talk about that program, but it's something that's going to reward the people with the smallest carbon footprint, and that's the elderly and the poor. The rest of us are going to pay more for that fossil fuel.
Here's the problem. I believe, because this isn't a problem, this is a statement. I live here because I like the outdoors. I like to ski, whether it's downhill at Rib Mountain or water ski and tube and hike and bike and hunt. I live here because I love the outdoors. And I want to make sure we preserve and protect our environment. But make no mistake, I'm only looking out for you. Because if Mary had a chance to impose on you these new rules, what it's going to do, it's going to drive up the cost of your electricity bill. And I don't know if you looked at your electricity bill. It might not be so bad because the cost of natural gas has gone down, but electricity has gone up through the roof because of these new rules and regulations. She doesn't want to let us build pipelines. We don't have any wells here to get any oil. You got to bring it in. And so if you can't build a pipeline, well, maybe you're going to send it by rail, which isn't as safe, or by truck, which isn't as safe. If you care about the poorest among us and you implement these rules, they can't afford another $40 or $50 in their energy bill. But look at the places that we work. We have a competitive advantage with energy. If you can drive down the cost of your energy, then you have more money to pay your employees. But here's another example of, I want to go after our small businesses, make them pay more, tax them more, regulate them more, and then say, oh, I bet there's a lot of money left over to pay you a higher wage. That's not the case. We got to get it right. All of the above energy is the right approach, but this tax stuff goes way too far.
I have a quick follow-up very quickly. What's your view of nuclear power, which provides 18% of the energy in Wisconsin?
To me. Well, nuclear power needs to be very, very, very carefully monitored. And it is being carefully monitored. At least I hope. We know what happened at Chernobyl. We know what happened at Fukushima. Nuclear power is dangerous, and if I think we could wean ourselves of nuclear power, of fossil fuel energy, if we could go with wind, with solar, with things that are going to be environmentally so much safer for our society, that would be wonderful. And so that would be my plan. As we wean ourselves of fossil fuels, as those of us who have the bigger homes and that bigger carbon footprint are paying more in our utilities, remember that plan is the poor are going to be paying significantly less with the dividends that they get. But I'm going to look at my utility bill and say, maybe I should get those solar panels. Maybe I should look into some kind of wind power. It's a wonderful way to get us to get off dead center and start looking into alternative energy forms.
Make no mistake, you just said that if you don't make a whole lot of money, the cost of your energy no doubt will go up, but it might not go up as much as someone who makes a little more than you. But you're going to have to pay more for your energy, for your gas. I don't know about you, Mary, but if you want to try to heat your house in January with solar panels and windmills, good luck with that. Or if you want to try to drive your car with solar panels and windmills, good luck with that too. It will not work. This is going to take us some time, but I look at nuclear. I think if you look at the emission side of how energy works, you really have zero emissions. Now, we got to deal with the spent fuel rods, which becomes a greater issue. But I think nuclear is a great resource. It's clean. It's relatively inexpensive. But I will agree with Mary. It can be very dangerous. We've seen that firsthand in our lifetimes, what can happen if a nuclear plant goes bad. So making sure you do it the right way is appropriate. But this is clean. And
Okay, we certainly have had a lot of wonderful information this evening, and for the sake of time, we are now going to move to our closing statements. As I mentioned at the beginning, the coin toss was done, and Professor Mary Heft won the coin toss, so you get to go first for your closing statement.
Okay, thank you, Seth. Thank you, panelists. And thank you, everyone, for being so attentive, so polite. I think you can tell that my opponent and I, the differences between us, they're huge. So let me just say this. If you're satisfied with the education that your child is receiving, if you think that it's good enough and there isn't a need for more funding, if you think that your Social Security check is secure, you don't have to worry about that, if you're not worried about climate change and you don't think that we need to do something to address it, you really might like to vote for my opponent, Sean Duffy. But if you think that you deserve better, if you think that you deserve a representative in Washington that's going to be there to serve your needs, the needs of the 7th Congressional District, and not the needs of Wall Street, then I ask you to vote for me, Mary Heft. Together we'll build a better future.
Congressman Duffy?
Mary, it's been a pleasure to have the debate with you and panel. Thank you for the great questions and all of you for being part of this great conversation. And again, NTC providing this wonderful room. Serving your needs, there is a big distinction, because if you want your needs served by that faceless bureaucrat in Washington or that big government who better knows how to run your life than you do or run your business better than you do, and like Mary and so many others in Washington say, give me more of your money because I know how to spend your money better than you do. There's a different choice for you. But if you want the American dream, if you want freedom, if you want opportunity, if you want a smaller, more limited government that can be nimble, that can be responsive to you, but gives you the ultimate freedom to live the life that you choose, whatever the dream is, that's what I'm fighting for. And it has been an honor and a privilege to get up every day, working my hearts out for the people that I love and the place that I care about. And thank you for all being part of this debate.
All right, that will conclude our debate for this evening from North Central Technical College. On behalf of everyone at NTC, our panel, and for the audience, thank you very much to Professor Mary Heft, to Congressman Sean Duffy for spending some time with us this evening. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. We appreciate it. And thank you. Have a good evening.